A genuine act of evil was committed on 5 innocents in the basement of a shop in downtown Ogden, Utah. When the violence ceased, 3 were dead, 2 were forever scarred, and a legacy of racial discrimination in the Utah judiciary remained for decades. This crime is considered by many historians among the worst in Utah during the 20th century, and to this day is used as a textbook crime at the FBI Academy in Quantico. They are the hi-fi shop murders, and this is Below the Salt. Hi everyone, I'm Jack.
And I'm Valerie.
And today we're going to be talking about the hi-fi shop murders.
And I know a little bit about this, and I am not ready to hear more.
I don't think anyone's really ready for this one, because, as far as a crime, it's not, the craziest thing you've ever heard, but there are some little details that just get under my fingernails.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It's really rough. And, there's a reason why they kind of use it as a textbook crime, because it does follow a lot of the cause and effect style of law enforcement, of how to work your way backwards through a crime, and so we'll get into that. First, I think we're gonna go over some background about about the perpetrators of this crime.
Cool.
If you're ready.
Ready.
Are you ready?
No.
No, you're not ready. Okay, let's
do it anyways.
Okay, so Dale Pierre was born in the island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Tobago? I don't really know.
I don't know.
You know? Okay. Yeah. Anyway. He was born there, TNT, I'll just call it TNT for now, in 1952. Growing up, Dale was always in trouble for one thing or another, although his parents said they always tried to teach him right from wrong, as any parent would.
Mm-hmm.
Dale was apparently a compulsive liar, and he had an uncontrollable temper. In June of 1970, Dale left Trinidad TNT, I'm not even going to bother trying, TNT, for Brooklyn, New York. And 3 years later, he joined the United States Air Force and was assigned to Hill Air Force Base in Utah as a helicopter mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
So you know,
yeah, I know Hill Air
Force Base. Yeah, it's just north. It's in Davis County, which is the county just to the north of Salt Lake, and it's a huge employer for the state, as well as it's a big part of our military presence here in Utah, which is pretty cool. What isn't cool, though, is what happened next. Pierre became a suspect in the murder of Sergeant Edward Jefferson. This is a year before the hi-fi murders. Sergeant Jefferson was found murdered by a bayonet in his apartment.
Jesus.
So like a bayonet that obviously it's screams military. I wonder who could have killed this military man with a military weapon, We're gonna assume.
It also screams skewer.
It does scream skewer, and there's this particular detail about this little bayonet wound that I'll share with you momentarily. Detective Don Moore, I believe he'd be of the Ogden Police Department. I don't have a source for that. Pieced together what happened from witnesses and records. On Sunday, October 1st, 1973, Dale Pierre had been at Jefferson's apartment taping music, while Jefferson discovered that his car keys were missing, and they were not found again until the next day. Pierre had swiped the keys, brought them back to the Hill Air Force Base to duplicate them, and then put them back in Jefferson's apartment. When Pierre returned to their apartment the next day to help him find the keys, and they miraculously reappeared, Jefferson was, of course, super suspicious. Oh, the keys just happened to show up, and Pierre just, led me right to them. It's very suspicious. So Jefferson changed his locks. He changed the ignition in his car, and then he confronted Pierre about it. And Pierre, of course, just denied everything. Some later that week, on Friday, October 5th, 1973, Jefferson was found murdered. The perpetrator had jammed the bayonet with such ferocity into Jefferson's face that only the handle of the bayonet could still be seen.
Oh my gosh.
So the entire blade was completely inside the guy's poor head. Detective Moore came to the conclusion that Pierre had murdered Jefferson. Of course, there had been lots of witnesses and records about it. However, there was not enough evidence to arrest Pierre, so the case did remain unsolved until the hi-fi shop murders happened the next year. So that just goes to show you, recently in true crime I've been hearing a lot about how sometimes it's hard to prove. I mean, it's hard to you can have all the circumstantial evidence in the world, but like actually nailing someone for the crime is a lot harder than it
Yeah,
sounds.
especially back in the 70s.
Yeah, well, because they
didn't have DNA.
They didn't have
evidence.
DNA, and it's just the mechanism of how law enforcement worked their way through a crime has changed so drastically in the last 40, 50 years. So it's much better today, I would say, but it's still really difficult. I've been listening to a lot about Ed Wayne Edwards, the serial killer from Ohio, and they knew that he'd committed a lot of murders, but they could just never get him on it because they never found enough evidence.
Interesting.
I cannot imagine the frustration of knowing, hey, I'm investigating this guy for murder, and I know for a fact that he did it, but I can't do anything about it. Like, I can't even imagine being a police officer and having to deal with that.
Yeah, that
stress.
would be so frustrating.
Okay, so that's our friend Dale Pierre. There was a few other people involved as well. William Andrews was born in Virginia in 1953. His childhood was basically normal. He was a well-behaved child, apparently. He joined the Air Force in 1973, the same year that Dale Pierre did, and was also assigned to Hill Air Force Base as a helicopter mechanic, just like they're stationed together. At Hill, the two men became friends against all odds. Apparently, Pierre kind of had an attitude problem, which, you can kind of surmise. He seems like he has an attitude problem. So no one really wanted to be friends with him, except for William Andrews. And when William Andrews became friends with him, all William Andrews' friends said goodbye. They didn't want to be friends with someone who was friends with Dale Pierre. So he's a stinker. And have you had experiences where you're like, oh wow, my friend is friends with this person? Like, I need to think twice about my relationship with them.
Yeah, I guess there's just been people who I don't like that make me also not like their friends.
Yeah.
Because I know they're friends with the person that I don't already like.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's toxic, It
Totally.
just like it's like a sphere of toxicity. All right, so let's see. So to their commanding officer, the one who was over both of them, it seemed that Andrews was very much the follower, and Pierre was with his uncontrollable rage, was the leader. Pierre and Andrews entered the hi-fi store in Ogden just before closing time, brandishing handguns. Two employees, Stanley Walker, who was 20 years old, and Michelle Ainsley, who was 19 years old, were in the store at the time and taken hostage.
Oh, babies.
Yeah, they are baby little birds, and they're just closing up like they just another day, normal day.
Never work retail.
Yeah, retail, like on top of all the other fun stuff about retail, is occasionally getting robbed, and or getting taken hostage. That's great.
Maybe even murdered.
Yeah, possibly. Well, we will get into the nitty gritty here. Also, don't shop retail either is a lesson here, because okay, it's not. We'll get into it. Pierre and Andrews took those two shop workers down into the basement of the store, tied them up, and then they began robbing the store. I think, looking at the police reports, it was mostly stereo equipment that they wanted. The big, in the 70s, there were all those super expensive turntables and speaker setups, so they wanted to fill up their van with that stuff and get out of there. As they were working on stealing some of the equipment, a 16-year-old boy named Courtney Naisbitt entered the store to thank Walker, the male shop worker, for helping him with an errand. He was also taken hostage and tied up in the basement with Walker and Ainsley. They continued trying to rob the store, and people just keep coming in, and I imagine it was really frustrating for them. Like, at some point, like, they should have tried to make they probably should have tried to make the store look closed or something, but I think they were going in and out of the door. I don't know, but people kept interrupting. Later that evening, Orrin Walker, who is Stanley's 43-year-old father, became worried that his son had not returned home.
Oh no.
He arrived at the store and was also taken hostage. So that's 4 total hostages.
Mhm.
At this point, Michelle Ainsley began begging and crying for her life. And this is this is the kind of a content warning. It's about to get a little rough here. After Orrin, the father, was taken to the basement, Pierre ordered Andrews to go out to the van and bring him back an item. Andrews returned with a bottle in a brown paper bag from which Pierre poured a cup of blue liquid. Pierre ordered Orrin to administer the liquid to the other hostages, but Orrin refused, and he was bound, gagged, and left face down on the basement floor. Just as that happened, Carol Naisbitt, Courtney, the 16-year-old boy's 52-year-old mother, entered the store looking for her son who had been missing for some time now. Maybe just probably
And
a
her
little.
husband.
No. That's Orrin's dad, or Stanley's dad is Orrin. So there's 2 parents unrelated to each other that have both been
I
tied
thought
up.
it was the 16-year-old's dad.
No, it's the 20-year-old shopkeeper's dad.
And then the 16-year-old
And the 16-year-old shopper's
Oh
mom.
no. Oh no.
She enters the store looking for her 16-year-old son who had gone in there. And apparently her son and the shop worker were very close friends.
Mhm.
Carol, like the other 4 hostages, was taken to the basement, bound, and placed next to her 16-year-old son. Pierre and Andrews then propped up each of the victims into sitting positions and forced them to drink this mysterious blue liquid, they telling them it was vodka laced with sleeping pills, so they just go to sleep. It was not vodka laced with sleeping pills. It was industrial drain cleaner.
Oh no.
I think I've heard the actual product was Drano, but it could have been any of them.
Ugh, that's horrifying.
Yeah, well, and there's some details about what Drano does to a person when it touches their skin that is just it's a monstrous thing to do to someone else. I'll kind of get into it a little bit. Once we hit the trial stage, spoiler alert, there is a trial stage. It talks about why Drano was their weapon of choice here. The active ingredient of Drano is sodium hydroxide, which is extremely toxic for humans. It burns instantly. The moment it touched the hostage's lips, enormous blisters broke out, and it began to burn their tongues and throats and peel away the flesh around their mouths. Michelle Ainsley, the little 19-year-old Michelle Ainsley, was still begging for her life. Was actually not forced to drink the drain cleaner. She was the only one that was kind of spared that. But she wasn't spared other things later. We will get into that. I feel like I'm saying we'll get into that a lot.
A little bit.
But we are going to get into it. I don't want to like give you a false impression of what's going to be coming down the road. Okay. So, they're in immense suffering, these 4, the mom and son and the father and son are in quite a lot of pain. Obviously they have severe burns on their mouths and throats and tongues.
Mhm.
Pierre and Andrews tried to duct tape their mouths shut to hold the drain cleaner in because they weren't swallowing it, because the instant it touches your face it just kind of pours back out, because of course you don't swallow something that's instantly burning you. So they wanted to duct tape the hostages' mouths shut in order to hold the drain cleaner in and to silence their screams of pain.
Ugh.
But they were unable to tape them down because the liquid from their burns and their blisters prevented the adhesive from sticking to their mouths. Orrin Walker, the dad, was the last to be given the drain cleaner, but since he was the last one, he saw what was happening to the other hostages, so he mostly kind of just spit it back out, and then he faked the convulsions of screams of his son and the other hostages. So Pierre became angry because the deaths were taking so long, and honestly, the deaths actually weren't happening. I mean, other than the really grievous face and mouth and possibly throat wounds. Those might have been fatal given time, but Drano to the mouth, not particularly fatal.
So his intention absolutely was to kill them.
Yes, his intention was to. They swig back a little Drano and then they drop dead. That is not what happened.
No.
They were loud. They were screaming. It was literally messy, and it just wasn't happening. So he became angry and he shot the Naisbits, both Carol, mom, and Courtney, 16-year-old boy, in the back of the heads.
Oh.
Pierre then shot at Oren, the father, but missed him. He then fatally shot Stan Walker, the shopkeeper, the 20-year-old, before again shooting at Oren, this time striking him. So all 4 of the mother-son, father-son pairs have been shot. Then Michelle Ansley, I think I've been saying Ainsley, it's Ansley. She had not been, didn't get any of the Drano, but she was targeted here. Pierre took Ansley to the far corner of the basement and forced her at gunpoint to remove her clothes, and then repeatedly and brutally raped her while Andrews watched.
What a piece of shit.
Yeah, total garbage human being. And that's presumably why he spared her the Drano, I presume, but it's really so dark and messed up. To rob a place is one thing, but to go in intending to kill everyone and rape people, that's so many steps beyond just robbing a place and committing a crime. One of them is wrong, the other one is evil. Yeah.
That makes me sick.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. When he was done, he dragged her, still naked, back to the other hostages, threw her on her face, and fatally shot her in the back of the head.
Jeez.
So he executes all of them, except for Michelle, rapes Michelle, and then executes her as well. Then, Oren, the dad, turns out he's still alive. He survived his gunshot wound and his minor facial burns. Oh gosh. This is
You're stressing me out.
This is the worst part for me in particular. So, Oren's still alive, so Pierre got on top of him, sat on top of him, and wrapped a wire around his throat and tried to strangle him. This didn't work. Strangling someone
takes so long.
It takes up to strangling someone until they're unconscious takes a matter of minutes. Strangling someone until they're dead takes another matter of minutes. Again, the movies kind of give a false impression of how simple and straightforward death is. Drano doesn't kill you the instant you drink it, and getting strangled with a wire doesn't kill you within 20 seconds. That's something they do to make movies pace faster, you know what I mean? So, tried to strangle him, and it just didn't work. He just wasn't rendering unconscious. So, when that failed, Pierre and Andrews inserted a ballpoint pen into Oren's ear.
Oh my god.
And Pierre stomped it until it punctured his eardrum, broke, and exited the side of his throat.
Oh my god, his throat?
Yeah, so instead of going into his brain,
it went
because the ear canal is angled a little bit, of course, so it went down and out his throat.
Oh.
Yeah.
My god.
That detail is something that's gonna haunt me forever. So.
That's horrible.
Yeah. Then, assuming that Oren had died from that, Pierre and Andrews went upstairs, finished loading what is estimated to be about $25,000 worth of equipment into their van, and left. So that's the crime.
Was that $25,000 for the 70s or for now?
$25,000 for the 70s.
Still.
So it would be like, I don't think it would be much more than 50 now, though.
No.
You know, so 2 people did actually survive. Courtney, who was shot in the back of the head, the boy, the 16-year-old boy.
16-year-old survived.
I'm gonna get into his condition a little bit later.
Oh,
He did
no.
survive with some injuries. Oren actually could lived through the whole thing. Like I think he was conscious the whole time.
That's horrible. He has the worst one after
Michelle
watching his kid die.
Yes.
Oh no.
And poor Courtney saw his mom die.
Yeah.
The victims were discovered 4 hours later when Oren Walker's wife
Came to check on him.
and his other son
Oh.
came to the store looking for him. Stan Walker, their son, and Michelle Ansley were already dead. Carol Naisbitt actually lived long enough to be loaded onto the ambulance, but she was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. Although Courtney was not expected to live, the little 16-year-old Courtney, he did survive. He did have some severe brain damage. But he actually recovered. From what I can tell later on, he covered pretty well. I think he had to learn how to do a few things, again. But all things considered, he's very lucky to survive.
The poor boy.
And he's got the facial burns as well. Despite his severe injuries, Oren Walker survived with burns to his stomach. So I guess a little did get into his stomach and his esophagus from both the Drano and from the pen incident. And from the wire. His throat got a lot of trauma.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's horrifying. After the news of the crime broke, an Air Force officer called the Ogden police and told them that Andrews, the follower of the pair, had confided in him months earlier. One of these days, and he said, "One of these days I'm going to rob that hi-fi shop, and if anyone gets in the way, I'm going to kill them."
Oh my gosh.
So, like, not like super great criminal masterminds we're dealing with here. So the noose is already tightening on these guys. Hours after that call was received, 2 teenage boys were dumpster diving near Hill Air Force Base, and they discovered the victims' wallets and purses and called the police. So they also robbed the hostages, not just the store. A crowd of airmen quickly formed around the dumpster and the police investigation around the dumpster, and that crowd included Pierre and Andrews.
Oh my god.
The detective...
Why do like some of the worst criminals
are so dumb
get involved with the investigation like that?
It's because they're just dumb. They don't see that like just by being adjacent, like you're kind of pulling yourself into the investigation.
Idiot.
Like these guys failed crime school multiple times.
Seriously.
Here. So actually, this is a really cool bit. The detective, guy was smart, who responded to the scene, believed that the killers might be in the crowd, rightfully so.
Wow.
And so he put on a little show. He started talking dramatically and waving each piece of evidence up in the air with tongs as he pulled them out of the dumpster. He later noted in his report that 2 airmen in particular seemed nervous and paced around the crowd, spoke loudly, and made frantic gestures with their hands. The detective later identified in a lineup these 2 airmen as Pierre and Andrews.
Interesting.
The detective later received an award from the Utah branch of the Justice Department for his use of proactive techniques.
Very cool.
So that's kind of cool. Andrews and Pierre were taken into custody because of this, because of the dumpster incident. They like threw themselves right into it. And a search warrant was issued for their barracks. Also because of the call, of course. The call that was made. Hey, this guy told me he was going to commit this crime. So the a search warrant was issued for their barracks. I don't know why that was tongue twisting me so much. Police found flyers for the hi-fi shop and a rental contract for a public storage facility. It's like these guys lined up all the evidence for them. You know what I mean? Like it's.
Did they even try?
No, they didn't try, and they weren't thinking about that. They were just thinking about the smash and grab. But that's why this is such a textbook case, is because it's like these are the things you have to do. These are the pieces of evidence that are going to be left behind with something like this, because it's actually weirdly straightforward despite the horrific nature. So they then got a warrant for the storage unit, where they discovered the $25,000 of stereo equipment from the hi-fi store and a half-empty bottle of industrial drain cleaner. Based on this evidence, Pierre and Andrews were formally charged with the crime, and a third person, the van getaway driver Keith Roberts, was also charged.
Wow.
So, Pierre, Andrews, and Roberts, the getaway driver, were jointly tried for first-degree murder and robbery in a neighboring county. I think since the hi-fi shop is in Ogden, which is Weber County, I think they were tried in Davis County, which is they're basically like the same neighborhood.
How did they know Roberts?
I think the Pierre and Andrews gave him up. They said.
I mean, how did Pierre and Andrews know Roberts?
Oh, I think he was another airman.
Okay.
Yeah, he was also there. Yeah. So they were all convicted. They were convicted of all the charges and sentenced to death. Roberts was, however, only convicted of robbery and was sentenced 5 years to life, and I think he served about 25. He was actually released.
Oh.
Roberts, the getaway driver. Yeah. Which is interesting because sometimes getaway drivers get the full brunt of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't. It must have been there must have been evidence, and I don't know. We can we might want to talk to.
Maybe we'll do a hi-fi part 2.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a hi-fi part 2 and dig into that. We do have some friends that are defense attorneys, and they might know why crimes would be tried. Okay. Why they would be different charges.
Jot that down.
Yeah. During the trial, it was revealed that Pierre and Andrews had robbed the store with the intention of killing anyone they came across, which is just like wholly unnecessary. I guess maybe they'd probably committed a few like minor crimes. This is total speculation, but if they'd committed a few minor crimes before and been worried about witnesses and been like, oh man, we don't want that to happen anymore. But it takes so many steps. Like, so many steps away from basic human decency to be like, oh yeah, we'll just kill them, you know, like, sure, why not? So they robbed it with intent to kill, and in the months prior to the robbery, they had been looking for a way to commit the murdies. I don't know what murdies are. Quietly and cleanly. They saw the movie Magnum Force, which is one of the Dirty Harry movies, in which a prostitute is forced to drink Drano and then is shown immediately and silently dropping dead.
Oh, brother.
So, Pierre and Andrews...
Seriously, how
crime
dumb
school dropouts
are these guys?
We're going to call them crime school dropouts. Decided that this would be an efficient method of murder and decided to use it in their crime.
Ugh.
Orrin Walker was the star witness for the prosecution, since he survived. In spite of his twice mutilated throat, he testified against Pierre and Andrews. Courtney Naisbitt was unable to testify as he could not recall the events of that night due to his injury. He was amnesiac about that night. He eventually was able to finish high school, and he obtained his pilot's license, which was apparently his lifelong dream. So he did recover to the point of being able to pilot a plane and have kind of a career in a life. He actually, we'll get it. There's a little bit more here in the aftermath, which is it's really cool. It's like after suffering through something like that and having the damage on yourself and your family and your poor mom passing away, like at least you got to have two really cool achievements for someone who's gone through that kind of brain trauma. So, following the handing down of death sentences to the defendants, the NAACP and Amnesty International campaigned to commute Pierre and Andrews' death sentences. The NAACP demanded their death sentences should be revoked because of racial bias at the trial. They noted that the defendants were both black and the victims and jury were all white. And that might seem like kind of like a cursory thing, like, oh, it seems pretty clear that they did commit the crimes. But you do have to take into account that usually when they do have crimes involving, they have a pretty mixed jury. They do that, you know, so there's a sense of fairness, like, so it's not like...
It must be hard to get a diverse jury here in Utah. We're so white.
That's actually why the death sentences were not commuted. Because they said our pool is very small, and they did have one black man on the jury who had to recuse himself at one point because he knew one of the police officers involved. But yeah, it was hard for them to find that many black jurors in Utah, because Utah is an exceptionally monoracial place.
Yeah,
it's extremely white.
And again, back in the 70s, you know. Wasn't a super healthy environment.
Right, and this
non-whites.
there's a really bad instance about what happened during the trial.
Oh no.
So, despite the movements by the NAACP and Amnesty International, Pierre was put to death by lethal injection in 1987. After Pierre's execution, a petition for stay of Andrew's execution was submitted to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The Inter-American Commission petition alleged the handwritten note said, "Hang the N-words."
Oh no.
And it had been found in the jury area during a recess by a bailiff.
Ugh.
So obviously someone in the jury had it out for them.
Yeah.
That being said, that was it's like, and you don't want to think bad about the jury, right? Not the whole jury, but as far as they know, they could have been like passing around that note and been like, "Oh, haha, let's." Yeah. It's just is a completely toxic environment, and
definitely.
That being said, was justice still served? I'm gonna say Orrin Walker had the wherewithal to point out the right guys, and that these were the guys responsible for the crime, and that justice was served. Considering the time. That being said, I think it would be perfectly fair to have a retrial.
I agree. Especially for Andrews, I guess, if he wasn't the mastermind behind it.
Yeah, and that's what
he didn't rape anybody.
Right. He did. Was complicit.
Yeah, he's a witness.
Yeah, but yeah. So it's so gray, and it's so sad because obviously now there's nothing we can do about it, which is one of the points against capital punishment.
Yeah. Is Andrews still alive in prison?
No, Andrews was executed as well.
Andrews
was executed by a lethal injection 5 years later in 1992.
Okay.
Despite those appeals, both death sentences were upheld, mostly due to the strength of the witness testimony and that sort of thing. So, yeah, would it have been appropriate to possibly give them a retrial or give maybe just Andrews a retrial? I think it would have been, but according to the Utah court in 1974, it was not considered that way.
Well, they were pieces of shit, so.
Yes, they were human garbage. Pierre and Andrews, on death row, were notoriously hated prisoners, even among the black prison population.
Oh my gosh.
Especially by Gary Gilmore. And Gary Gilmore is someone that we're going to talk about later, because he is a really interesting case here in Utah. Gilmore was a convicted murderer, and he was the first person to be executed in the United States after the 4-year federal hiatus on capital punishment.
Oh,
interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, the U.S. court at some point, the Supreme Court, said something about the death penalty being cruel and unusual punishment, so they struck it down, and then it was brought back 4 years later. And that actually commuted a lot of people's death sentences. I believe Charles Manson's death sentence, for example, was commuted because of that 4-year window. So when Gary Gilmore is getting taken to the firing squad, which is the firing squad in 1970, which is pretty crazy, his final words in the compound were, "I'll see you in hell, Pierre and Andrews." That's how much people didn't like these guys. Yeah, it's you're not very popular among the other death row. It's like, I'm gonna commit my final. Well, they weren't his final words. Yeah. They were his final words in prison.
Wow.
The Deseret News reported that the exact words were, "Adios, Pierre and Andrews. I'll be seeing you directly." So little Barry.
What a sass master.
He is a sass master, and he's also human garbage, as we'll find out in our later Gary Gilmore episode. So. Yeah, he's a stinker also. The Hi-Fi murders are still seen as among the worst crimes ever committed in the state of Utah. The case is taught to FBI trainees at the FBI Academy in Quantico, and it is included as a sample case in the FBI's crime classification manual.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It is interesting and also horrible.
Yes, it's interesting how something so horrific can also be in a textbook. You know what I mean? Like, hey, this is what
as
FBI
a
agents.
Training tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just as a historical event, but as a tool.
Yes, this is something that has potentially helped FBI agents work through a crime, because that's how you have to work through crime sometimes. Orrin Walker passed away in 2000, and Courtney Naisbitt, who did suffer chronic pain due to his injuries for the rest of his life, passed away in 2002.
Aw.
In an interview with USA Today, Andrews claimed that he never intended to kill anyone. This was during his appeals phase. This claim was later rebutted when a detective cited a statement by Andrews in which he admitted to being the one who purchased the drain cleaner and brought it to the store on the night of the killings.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second, especially after one of those Air Force guys called about.
Yeah, Andrews was the one who said, "I'm gonna go in there and clear the
store and I'm gonna kill anybody I see."
Do we know that Andrews was so much the follower? Andrews could have been the one who planted the idea in Pierre's head.
Yeah.
To someone potential murderer hooks up with an actual murder, and you get a little murder soup going.
Gross. Soup.
Murder soup. It's not a good soup. You don't want any of that.
Yeah, I hate that.
So that is the story of the Hi-Fi Shop murders.
Probably gonna dream about stuff getting shoved in my ears tonight.
Yeah, or drinking something highly corrosive.
Yeah.
Or both,
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's a insanely brutal crime.
I'm really sad for all the parents that lost children that night.
Well, yeah. You have one child who lost his parent and one parent who lost his child.
And
then you have
Courtney.
Courtney was the son.
Yeah, but he also had to just grow up, and then his mother had to deal with those consequences as well as of raising this child.
No,
who
his
went
mother
through.
passed.
Well, who did he live with then?
His father.
Oh, that was. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Block that part out.
We need like a family tree or something. It actually when I was researching this, it did take me a while to get the relationships all down.
Courtney had to suffer through that himself, and then his father had to deal with raising a child that had to go through that, which is in its own way traumatic.
Right.
And then also the poor 19-year-old girl's family had to live without her, continuing on. And then of course, Orrin who died, and
Orrin Walker's wife.
Orrin, who lost his son and also got hurt, and then his wife, who lost her son,
found the crime scene,
and and had to help her husband through his injuries and also losing his son.
Yes,
that's horrible.
There's just like an echo of pain that just like it was a big deal.
The victims are never the only victims.
Yeah, you have a cascade of victims when crimes like this happen, and it's actually interesting. This story, one of the reasons why it gained national attention is because, why it stayed in the national sphere after the crimes. Someone wrote a true crime book about it called Witness, and it was one of the first true crime books that took an active steps to address and take the perspective of the victim instead of the perpetrator.
Oh, cool.
And it was about Orrin and about how he, his experience throughout the crime and his life afterward and stuff. So it's very interesting, and you just like you never know how far the pain of the victims can spread, and it's just it's horrific. But the good news is that it is being used to help train law enforcement and hopefully prevent crimes like this from happening in the future. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again with another episode very soon.